Welcome, one and all, to a brand new series this week. I'm calling it The Virginian Vault. I hear you out there. This isn't a new series for you. And thank you. Thank you for sticking around. I started watching The Virginian in early 2025. This has been one of kind of the series of the year for me. And when Starz pulled it rudely from their streaming lineup roughly in July, I resolved I had to talk more about this show. Because it was entirely too hard to find. The DVDs were pricey, it wasn't on many streaming sites, really any, and I just started swallowing my pride, and because I am a DVD collector, I needed to do it anyway, buy the discs. With as hard as I had to search, I decided I needed to talk about this. So it's been on my TikTok in short form, it's been over on the blog, but I decided this is the better home for it. We can be a little more open, a little more unfettered. I don't have to limit it. Just the Virginian's delight. But before I get too much deeper into this, my name is Kim. I am your resident fangirl of the weird, wacky goodness of the stuff your algorithm sometimes refuses to acknowledge, and welcome to Piercing Pop Culture. Let's get to the good stuff. So I've reached Season 3, Episode 17 in my ongoing first-time watch of NBC's legendary but difficult to find 90-minute Western. This is an episode called Two Men Named Laredo. The Virginian, for those who may be unfamiliar, follows the action in and around Shiloh Ranch in the 1890s set in Medicine Bow, Wyoming. The show ran from 1962 to 1971 and stars James Drury and Doug McClure, actors Lee J. Cobb, Roberta Shore, Clu Gulager, and Randy Boone are co-starring in Season 3, but they do change throughout the very long run. This time around, the Virginian, played by James Drury, hires a ranch hand who seems like a good kid. He's shy, he keeps to himself, and he reads a lot of poetry. However, when people around him start dying, things get a little more complicated. Fabian guest stars in Two Men Named Laredo. William Hale directs the episode from a script by Don Brinkley. Friends, this episode took me on a journey. I was clinging onto the back of the wagon the entire time. I was not entirely convinced, but I was definitely intrigued. As the episode is set up, the root of the drama takes shape as it's learned that Fabian's character, Eddie, just might have multiple personalities. I was initially a bit of a jerk here as I sat down to watch this episode. Probably through the first and into the second acts, largely due to the fact that it's Fabian who has to play this part that's complex and challenging and deals with some weighted subject matter. Truthfully, of the late 1950s Philly teen idols, I sometimes struggle with Fabian probably the most. For large chunks of the first half of this episode, I feel like Fabian is struggling under the weight of this character. It's not really until the third act that he really finds his footing. But it's once the narrative takes shape and we learn the truth about Eddie that Fabian's finally able to hone in on just who this young man is. In fact, his performance really is a thing of beauty as he has his final scene. No spoilers, of course, but it was captivating to watch as he skirts the various lines that he has to play with this character. This arc, though, it did feel a bit, I suppose troubling is the right word, from a 2025 perspective, of course. This stems from the fact that the episode is so keenly aware of Eddie's struggles. This episode is aware of what's going on. It's trying to make a point. It's trying to ask questions. However, though, I think this is an example of an episode where the language and perhaps the knowledge just isn't there in 1964 and 1965. I'm going to attempt to shy away from spoilers here, but the ending the episode gives us is very much framed as a happy ending. We see this as the best possible scenario. There's genuine hope there as the credits roll that things will work out. From a 2025 perspective, though, it isn't. The problem isn't solved, and there's not even a guarantee that Eddie will get the help he needs. As the ending credits roll, it feels like the narrative's still headed towards potential tragedy. As mentioned, though, I can't say this is due to any potential hostility or bias in the script. This is simply a case of being in 2025. There's an understanding and available language as it relates to these subjects that didn't necessarily exist when the episode was released. Like so many shows in this era, they're sensitively looking at these subjects and attempting to break new ground through their lens. However, the lens has changed through time, and it's hard to understand how language has changed if you didn't necessarily live it. Watching this episode, I was also immediately reminded of the 1957 Joanne Woodward film, Three Faces of Eve. I kept playing these comparisons and these questions through in my head as the episode took shape. I was thrown by the similarities and found myself wondering if there were news stories going on or something that led to these works being so similar in topics. Admittedly, when I was watching this, I'd actually forgotten when Three Faces of Eve came out and was assuming they were a little bit closer together. While the two pieces of media are separated by a number of years, a look at IMDb also yielded one more important comparison. Lee J. Cobb was in both this episode of The Virginian and Three Faces of Eve. So it seems like an easy inference to assume that the script was potentially inspired by the previous work. Did someone want to pay tribute to Lee J. Cobb or give Lee J. Cobb another opportunity to do something? Was the movie playing late night in a movie house or a television at some point and the writer just happened to watch it and go, ooh, that's a great idea? It's really an intriguing thought, and I really would love to read more into this because especially since Lee J. Cobb is there in both roles and is really his scene-chewingly brilliant self, especially in this episode. He was really impressive to watch. Switching gears, this episode was a nice change of pace, though, because it featured the heralded return of actor Doug McClure, who'd been absent for a lot of Season 3. He'd been missing for a number of episodes, more than he'd really been throughout the entire run of the series up until this point. And I do think the show was starting to miss him a bit. His absence also felt a bit more pronounced because this is the first season without actor Gary Clark, who was there to pick up some of the slack in seasons 1 and 2. Looking at McClure's filmography, he was busy on both the big and small screens during 1964 and 1965. IMDb gives an air date for this episode as coming in January 6th, 1965, and Doug McClure had 2 films coming out around this point. The Lively Set premiered in late 1964, while Shenandoah premiered in June of 1965. It's my assumption that he was likely either filming Shenandoah or promoting the Lively Set during this second half of Virginian's 3rd season. In the grand scheme of things, this episode was a rocky one for me. I can't necessarily say I knew where it was going. In truth, I was actually expecting the plot to be something entirely different, and throughout, I felt like I was watching multiple different Fabians. I was wondering if he was twins. There were moments where I was completely bought into this performance, but just as often I felt like I was watching Ride the Wild Surf and sitting through Jody whining about phonies. When considering this, I suppose my varying views on this episode make sense considering the plot. And Fabian here is very much at the center of focus. This is a challenging place to be. These Virginian episodes are movies. Take out the commercials, 75 minutes of TV. It would have been 90 when you have commercials. This is a lot of time to have to carry the screen. It's a challenge, and he doesn't shy away from that, despite potentially some struggles. The episode, though, it rests on his shoulders, and that's a heck of a challenge, and this is really why I keep coming back to this series. The Virginian Vault may be new in this audio format, and I want to keep this show as an ongoing focus. I find this really fun to watch and really entertaining to talk about. The show hooked me right off with a surprisingly campy pilot. I do need to dive into more of that because it pulled me straight in. And over 3 long seasons, these actors, these characters, and the personality of this gentle western sealed the deal for me. Every week there's a bevy of new 1960s guest stars to keep things entertaining. Stay tuned for more episodes of the Virginian Vault as I continue moving through the series. Well, that really should bring me to a close here at Piercing Pop Culture. Thank you, as always, for listening. My name is Kim. You can find me across the social medias as well as updates on what's going on here. I spend most of my time over on Blue Sky and Instagram at kpierce624. But you can also find the podcast's companion Substack at nostalgiaqueen.substack.com, as well as my website at piercingcinema.com. Thank you so much for joining me here, and have a good one all.